Welcome to episode 29, where we'll be discussing the challenges of pitching ideas and convincing partners or donors to adopt and act upon them. You might have a brilliant idea, but selling it is a lot more difficult than selling a product or service. This is where the market systems development approach comes in. Despite the progress in applying and generating relevant practices and evidence, there are several misperceptions about the market systems development approach, partly due to the way it is communicated. So, what to do about it? For this episode, with me are Masha Scholl, coordinator for international communications, responsible for global communications at Helvetas Swiss Intercorporation. Now, Masha, thank you for joining.
Thank you, Sabine.
And we also have Nasir Ahmed, who works in the AIP-PRISMA program in Indonesia as Chief Technical Officer, focusing on inclusive and quality-driven sustainable development. Nasir, thank you for joining Inclusive Plug.
Thank you, Sabine. It's a pleasure.
And we also have Sarah Bove, Program Director for Women in Business, a women's economic empowerment program, using the market systems development approach of the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, implemented in partnership with TechnoServe. Sarah, thank you for joining.
Thank you very much, Sabine.
Nasir, if we may start with you, can you tell us in brief, for the audience out there who want to do a refresher, what is the market systems development approach and how does it differ from other approaches to development?
Thank you, Sabine. It's a very good question to start with. Inclusive market systems development approach, or in short, I'll be using the term MSD. It is relatively a new concept compared to many other development approaches. It has emerged in the field of international development during early 2000. And the main essence of the approach is that it tries to address the inefficiencies in the market system, which kind of block the access and growth opportunities for the poor and other marginalized groups. And that's why it tries to change the way the system and its functions and the players interact with each other and operate. So that, in summary, is the essence of MSD approach. Now, how does it differ from some other approaches? I'll try to use an example. Let's consider the issue of skill development. In today's world, we have seen that many young people actually struggle to get access and upgrade their skills, which are needed to land them a good job or become a successful entrepreneur, for example. Now, this issue we can approach in different ways. The first option can be a direct approach. So the program will identify a group of young people who are in need of these skill development opportunities and provide them with the trainings directly. And after some time, probably they will also assess the effectiveness of the trainings. A job well done. But it has two main limitations. The first one is that the project, because it works directly with these young people, it can only reach a handful number of people. So it's not a scalable approach. The second one is that the nature of the skill in the job market changes frequently. So today, maybe the program has supported the need for, let's take an example, let's say healthcare services. After 1 year, maybe the requirement will be for digitalization in health service, which is a completely different skill set. But then there will be no one for these young people who can support with these training programs, because the program did not address the underperforming function or of the skill or training service. The second approach can be a more transactional approach. Here, the development program can work with a couple of training institutes, and through these training institutes, they'll try to reach to the young population who need the training, which is an add-on, but it does not bring a system-wide change to the training market. Now, the third option is to take a more systemic approach, or what we call the market systems approach. So it will start by asking some fundamental questions to understand why the training or the skill market is not working, why these young population are not able to place that demand to these training institutes, and why these training institutes are not providing these trainings. Is it because they cannot recognize the business opportunity, or is it because they do not have the capacity to deliver those trainings? Based on the findings of these questions and responses, then an MSD program, it will try to support some of the training institutes to understand how to capture the market signals and how to assess the need of these young populations, how to develop training modules and programs and deliver those trainings. So in the future, if there is a need of a new skill set, these training institutes will be able to, number one, identify those market opportunities, and number two, will be able to deliver those trainings. So based on this example, if we try to highlight the distinct features of MSD compared to other approaches, the first one is the approach takes a holistic and systems perspective. So in this case, instead of providing the trainings directly, it considered the roles and the functions and the capacity of the training institutes and also the incentives of the young population. The second distinguishing feature will be a facilitative role. An MSD program, it doesn't become part of the market transactions. So it tries to take a temporary and facilitative role during the course of the program implementation so that the market system is not disrupted. The third interesting feature will be sustainability. Because the approach has worked with the market players, in this case, the training institutes, to change their behavior and develop new ways of doing things, in this case, understanding the market opportunities and deliver those trainings, it brings a win-win situation for all the involved stakeholders. So the development outcomes are likely to continue beyond the program support. And the fourth feature will be scale, since the new way of doing things or the innovations are market-led, and without significant support from the development program, they're easily replicable and also scalable. So in a nutshell, I think these are some of the key features that distinguish MSD from other development approaches.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nasir, for this refresher and comparing to the other approaches. But let me be a bit more provocative. Is MSD just a buzzword, or does it have a real potential to transform development practice?
That is a real provocative question. I'll try to split the response in two parts. In the first part, I'll share my position, whether it's a buzzword or more than a buzzword. And in the second part, I'll try to share my understanding about whether it can transform development practices or not. So for the first part, definitely MSD is not a buzzword. And I'll provide two short arguments to support my position. So the first argument will be the emergence of MSD as an approach. It was not by accident or out of thin air. It emerged because there was a space created by the limitations of ongoing development approaches. Now, it is not a criticism per se. All approaches have some wonderful, strong features, but also some limitations. But the fact is that the space was created and MSD tried to fill up that space. The approach is also built on the premise of some solid PSD, private sector development approaches. It is built on the approaches like value chain development approach, business development service approach, and the business enabling environment or reform approach. So there is a solid foundation based on which MSD approach emerged and has evolved. The second argument will be that the MSD approach, it emerged in early 2000, and since then, it has continued to gain prominence. In the initial days, it was DFID, now known as FCDO, and the Swiss SDC, who have been championing the approach. But today, all major development agencies, bilateral agencies like the USAID, Swedish Sida, Danida from Denmark, the Dutch government, DFED from Australia, MFED from New Zealand, all of them have adopted a more systems approach and have awarded programs on MSD approach. Even multilateral organizations like ILO have started applying MSD approach in their development programs. So it shows that the approach has survived the test of the time, and it has been embraced by a large number of development agencies, both donors and implementers. So yes, it shows that MSD is not just a buzzword, and it remains highly relevant in today's international development space.
Thank you, Nasir. Yeah, Sarah, while the market systems development approach is more effective for lasting change, despite the progress made in generating evidence, there are still many misperceptions about the MSD approach. What are some common misperceptions about this approach?
Thank you, Sabine. Yeah, I mean, so with Women in Business, the WIN program, we've worked a lot with the private sector. We've identified the barriers for women micro-entrepreneurs in Mozambique to grow their businesses and increase their income and their control over their income, their economic empowerment. And so a lot of our partnerships are with the private sector. And I think we face two challenges. First is with companies from the private sector. So we've identified 5 main barriers that women face. And then within those barriers that we're calling, these are essential functions that would support women micro-entrepreneurs to grow their businesses. We've identified private sector partners within them to help us create solutions. So we work in access to financial services, around distribution, access to wholesale goods to sell, because most of these women are FMCG sellers, and also access to productive equipment. And then we work around access to management tools and information, and around rules and norms, where we've worked a lot with media partners. So we face 2 challenges. One is those, especially in the distribution sector, that have never worked with NGOs, and so it's they don't really understand in general how this match can be made between an organization coming to support them to build more inclusive business models, and so they haven't really heard of MSD or normal types of or the more direct approach. And so it takes a while to help sell the business case that if these companies do become more inclusive, they will be, supporting the business to grow, to reach a new segment, to have more loyal customers that use their products more, and also helping, this lower segment of the population to grow their income. But the because we work a lot in financial services, and around, I think that's probably the sector that has most experience working with development programs. It takes many conversations and meetings to explain that we don't have a database of women beneficiaries. Our beneficiaries are their clients or their sales agents or their mobile money agents. And so that shift in mindset to explain that we don't work with any women directly. We work with, through you, your potential customers are the women that we're trying to support by building this more inclusive business model. So I'd say that that part about not understanding who the beneficiaries are and that we don't have this is takes many conversations. And I think also and they're more used to the direct approach, where we pay the trainings, where we pay where we subsidize a lot more. And though obviously with the MSD approach, we do co-invest, in different initiatives. The idea is not for us to be coming and training all of their field teams or their agents. We train them, the company that we're working with, our partner, for them to then replicate these trainings, to generate the field teams or their sales agents. So I think that mindset of shifting from direct to indirect, the MSD approach, is the big misconception. And so this part about cost sharing, and they need to invest in it. And I mean, unless there's some exceptions, and we can cover it. No, there's some exceptions where the market isn't ready and they don't have the resources. We've done one partnership with a public institution. It's a National Authority for Professional Education, ANEP. And this is a public funded agency that doesn't have, lots of money to invest. So we've done a lot more heavy lifting there. But as Nasir was explaining, we thought it was such a important common good that would reach so many young people that we were willing to do that. In this case, what we did is we did Nasir was explaining a little bit, but we did like a market study to understand what youth needed in their training skills. And in this case, we supported ANEP, this national authority, to review their life skills curriculum. And so, we did a market study, understand what was missing in this life skills curriculum. And then with a consortium of other NGOs, we integrated business skills, financial education, and social norms in this life skills curriculum. But that means that because we did it with the national authority, now every single center across Mozambique, in all districts and provinces, that is accredited by ANEP has now this life skills curriculum. And we saw that because youth, they do this, the professional education, and then they leave and they don't get formal employment. So we wanted to put in business skills, financial education to support them to be able to, if they leave, they can still sell their skill, and start their own little business, etc. So anyway, so in this case, we funded directly, but in most cases, we ask the partner to co-fund, to bring their money or in kind, their salaries or the resource that they have, but to show that this is a business model that is sustainable. We want, and so that shift in mindset is difficult, and it takes a partner a while to understand why, we expect them to co-invest, because we're not doing this just to, the way we share it is we're not doing this just to support low-income women. It will also support the company. And so I think that's a big mindset and a shift that, a common misconception that we've seen working with the private sector. And I think, I think another one is how to measure this impact, but I guess this has more to do with us as an organization and MSD professionals and development professionals in general, rather than the company, because the company, the impact that they want to see is obviously in their numbers, and retention rates and default rates of loan repayments and increased sales, etc. So that's the kind of impact that we'd be looking with the company.
Thank you very much, Sarah. What about you, Nasir? What do you think? What are some of the misperceptions about the MSD approach?
Good examples that was shared by Bove. I will probably bring one additional example, especially from the donor side. There are people, especially who come from a different school of thought, and they do not always have the same level of understanding of private sector development. From them, I often hear the question that you are working through MSD approach, so you are basically giving money to the private sector who already have money. So what I try to explain is that, MSD programs is not only about providing financial support. We do provide financial support, but it is also about the technical support, the advisory services that we provide to the partners. And evidence shows that partners often value those intellect support and guidance more than they value the financial support. But most importantly, the type and nature of financial support are determined through a very rigid and comprehensive analysis. For example, how much uncertainty and risk there are for the partner in terms of adopting a new way of doing business or a new business model, whether the temporary nature of the financial support is going to distort the market or not. And we also think about the famous who pays framework. So which partner is doing what role now in the market system, who is paying for that service, and who will do that in the future, and who will pay that service in the future. So it is not about randomly providing a grant to a partner, but it is a strategic option to stimulate the partner to adopt some innovation and unlock the growth potential. So this is an area I think we need to also improve in terms of our communication. And that's a common misperception regarding MSD approach.
Thank you very much, Nasir. Masha, is part of the problem about the misperceptions about the approach, the way we communicate, like what are the challenges of communicating about MSD?
Well, there are definitely at least two big challenges in communicating MSD that I personally encountered. One is that usually when we talk to our target audience, we try to use the language that the target audience already understands. And for example, in the conventional approach, an organization could say, we built a new well for the community so that it has access to clean water. And you don't need to explain to anyone, well, at least to anyone who's older than 7 years old, what it means to build a well, right? But in my experience, even a lot of people in the nonprofit community do not know what MSD stands for. And well, for the general public, I would say that 99.99% do not know what it is. So you kind of have the double message and problem here, because you have to explain the concept and communicate your main message. For example, our MSD project is so cool, but you don't just focus on your main message. And it's always bad in communications when you have two messages. And sometimes you even have formats that are really short. Like, for example, you write a tweet and it has 280 characters maximum. And how can you introduce MSD there and then say your main message, So that's already a big problem. And then there's another challenge, is that even if the audience knows what MSD stands for, MSD projects are usually more complex. Like, they involve a lot of interventions in different areas, like maybe the government officials, and then the private sector, and then the, for example, educators in an education project. So it's very difficult to talk about all of these things at the same time, and if you talk just about one intervention, you can create a false idea of what the project is about. So basically, you have the challenge of communicating complexity, and communicating MSD is a prime example of this challenge.
Thank you very much, Masha. Advocates of MSD often compare this approach to other approaches and may refer to those approaches as traditional, conventional, or direct delivery, as also was mentioned by Nasir and also Sarah. However, I think that this may be due to a lack of appropriate language for comparison, probably, or without any ill intentions. But Sarah, to start with you, do you think the purpose of communicating about the approach shouldn't be to convert maybe the other side, but rather to demonstrate the value of MSD to existing methods of doing development in an improved way for improved results? What do you think?
Yeah, I think I would say, I just want to say something of what Masha was saying too. I think the language that we use a lot with the partners, I think MSD it can be, it's quite a, I would say, more niche type of development, and people can get carried away with the theoretical language and the frameworks, etc. And speaking, I mean, I completely agree. It's very complex, but I think using complex language, it makes it even more complex. I think often, when we're speaking with the partners, we really try to make it very simple. Like, we're here to support you, for you to, I mean, we very in simplistic terms, for you, your business model to grow, and also, you'll be supporting the low segment of the population. In our case, it's women micro entrepreneurs and low-income women. So it's like a win-win solution. That's how we try to present it. So I think language has to be very clear and practical, and not get caught up in the theory behind it, because apart from MSD experts, like, no one understands it. And I think that also, coming to your question, I think that then alienates MSD practitioners and programs from others, and makes it, when you get to very theoretical, defenders of either approach, I think it's not that productive to do that. I mean, I completely agree and vouch for the MSD approach and strategy, and its focus on sustainability and scale. But I would, sometimes it can, I don't think seeing it as one against the other makes sense, because there's also, pros to the direct approach. You get more depth, you really, you can get very deep with the beneficiaries that you're working with. And so you can also learn, I know that what we did with WIN is within TechnoServe in Mozambique, we also had another women's economic empowerment that was using the direct approach. And we worked very well together, because that was also serving us to do, to test the market, to understand more from the women, like the profile of the women we want to work with, know what they need in terms of business management skills, financial education. So I think there is worth in both. So I would say, I think also another part of, another way we can communicate better around MSD is showing the business case, and showing clear examples about what has been done, what has worked. This is also something we use, when we're working with the private sector. Look, this is another, if we don't, because obviously we're testing models in Mozambique, if we haven't tested that model yet, we use business cases and different solutions from different countries, and show how that has worked, what has been the impact for the company and for the system in general, and also for the beneficiaries. But now, the more you get tests and results and impact from your program, the more you share that, it's easier now. The work we're doing now to engage the private sector compared to 3 years ago is completely different. We have so much proof and results and our reputation that then it just gets easier and easier. So I think showing clear examples of what works, using very clear language, because that's what you really want is not to prove a case. What you really want are results, right, as an impact. And so how can you best get that? And it means using the same language. And also, I think, trying to not make it about, I think, to just be more open about hybrid models, or the pros and cons of different approaches. I think would be helpful.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Nasir, back to you. Like, do you think the purpose of communicating about the approach shouldn't be to convert the other side? Do you think the part of the problem is the way we communicate?
Yes, I agree. Sometimes I feel as MSD practitioners, we try to do the hard selling and try to convince the other side to become kind of an enthusiastic devotee of the MSD approach. But that should not be the goal, of course. The goal should be to demonstrate how development can be done in a more effective and more impactful and more meaningful way, and how to get good value for money for the aid investment. MSD approach, it's not a rigid methodology. What it does is that it gives us a set of framework principles. It helps us in our thinking process. And many of these MSD principles can actually be applied universally across any program design. It can be applied in a competitive market setting. It can be applied in a thin market or fragile context. It can work well in economic sectors, but we have seen it equally works well in other sectors such as health, education, WASH, governance, JETSI. So if we look into the approach, I mean, it tells us about asking critical questions like how the system will continue to function after the development support is withdrawn. It is about understanding how to change the behavior of the stakeholders. And these are critical questions that can make any development program more effective and more meaningful. So yes, instead of trying to convert others, we rather should demonstrate how others can adopt and contextualize some of the good principles of MSD in their own context and own program.
Thank you very much, Nasir. What can we do to communicate more effectively, Masha? Do you think that storytelling can help us communicate the value of MSD in a way that's impactful, relevant, and memorable?
You know, Sabine, I must first start by saying that I don't have like easy, clear-cut answers because I'm still learning myself and looking for answers. But there are, I would say, 3 principles that have helped me when communicating about MSD projects that I want to share. Maybe they also help others. One is that we need to focus on the why and not the how. And I know that it sounds counterintuitive when communicating an approach. You know, an approach is about the how. But, you know, there is a famous TED talk by Simon Sinek. I think it's called How Great Leaders Inspire Everyone to Take Action. And there he explains how a lot of big brands rallied a lot of customers, supporters, by focusing on the why and not the how and what. And this also applies to nonprofits. Nonprofits are realizing that if they focus on the why in their messaging, they get more donations, for example. So I know that we now just discussed that we shouldn't too aggressively like promote MSD approach and force everyone to adapt it. But if we want more supporters, more people who believe in the MSD approach or inclusive systems approach, we need to first say why we're using it and not start with how it works. For example, we can say, like, we can start by giving a definition. That would be how or what, like a systemic, an MSD approach is an approach that requires system actors to adapt and implement new practices, blah, blah, blah. Or we can start by saying that we want to create long-term inclusive change. We do not want to just implement a 4-year project. We want our impact to last beyond our project. Or we can say that we believe that conventional non-systemic approaches treat the symptoms and not the causes. I mean, it is just some examples, but of course, if you have a specific project, you can come up with a more in-depth answer as to why you're using this approach. And this will convince people more, and also it's more interesting to hear than go into the details of how you implement the project. Of course, there's still place for how, especially if the target audience are other experts, but the why should be the focus, the beginning of most communication products. Another principle that has helped me is that you should walk the talk by using the appropriate language. You know, actually it applies to any development communications, but it especially applies to communications about MSD projects. People and communities should be the active change makers in any communication product. You know, if you say about an MSD project that it helped people to improve their lives, or even worse, that it improved people's lives, it sounds like a contradiction in terms, because that's in an MSD project, the project is supposed to be a temporary facilitator and not like a savior that transforms people's lives. So you should say something that about people who chose to participate in the project changed their lives themselves. They should be the active protagonists of their story. I think by using this kind of wording, we not only walk the talk, but we also indirectly explain what the approach is about. just by using the right words. This just also solves a little bit the problem of explaining the approach without forgetting about our main message. And then the third principle is related to your question about storytelling. You know, sometimes people think that storytelling doesn't apply to communicating about approaches, about MSD approach in particular, because classical storytelling involves it's about a story about one person and how their life changed. And if you write a story of just one person, you don't show that it's an MSD project. You don't show the complexity. But storytelling is just fundamental part of being human. So actually, I believe that it applies to any communication. It doesn't matter what the target audience is or what the topic is. But of course, when we communicate MSD, I think we can be a little bit more maybe flexible and open when choosing the storytelling format. It can be still a classical story, but then the classical human-focused story is kind of intertwined with explanations of what has been done in a more systemic way. Or I would choose that format if we communicate to the general public. But if we communicate to the experts, we can also have no human protagonist at all. You know, there is a lot of interesting kind of infographics explaining storytelling about data, storytelling about insights and innovation. The innovation can be the protagonist. We can start by hooking the reader with something that grabs their attention, and then explain the problem. And then the culmination of the story is the solution that we found, the innovation, the insight, and how it solved the problem. So it's still storytelling. It's just non-conventional storytelling, which I guess makes sense for a non-conventional approach.
On this insightful episode, where we delved into communication about the market systems development approach, we had the privilege of hearing from 3 remarkable individuals who shared their expertise and experiences in this field. We explored various communication practices that can enable us as development practitioners to overcome challenges and effectively pitch the approach, from crafting compelling narratives to utilizing the language. These tactics can help us bridge the gap between ideas and action. Let us remember that selling ideas is not just about convincing partners or donors. It's about creating lasting change and building inclusive systems that benefit everyone. By adopting effective communication practices, we can amplify our impact and bring about meaningful transformation. Thank you to all of our viewers and listeners for joining us on this journey of exploring effective communication practices for promoting the market systems development approach. Remember, the power of change lies within our ability to effectively communicate and inspire others.